So we wanted to take this week's coping session to talk a little bit about using gratitude. Why? Obviously, because it's Thanksgiving, and that's the question that often gets floated around Thanksgiving. What are you grateful for? What are you grateful for? And what we know is that when people are grieving, it can be really hard to want to connect with gratitude. But there is a lot of evidence and research and people writing about the idea that actually using gratitude as a tool can be something that can really be helpful in boosting things like well-being, optimism, positivity, happiness, things like that. So even though those things may feel really far off for people, when we talk about coping, we always believe that coping is about just finding a lot of little tools that help to move that gauge just a little bit more towards feeling a sense of balance and well-being. The challenge here, as I just said, when we are grieving, somebody coming along and saying something like, oh, you should look for gratitude. You should try a gratitude journal. You should search for gratitude. It can feel really off-putting if gratitude isn't something that either we practiced regularly already, if it wasn't something that comes really natural to us. It can feel a lot like toxic positivity. It can feel very minimizing, but we want to be sure that people know we're not talking about bypassing anyone's grief to get to a point of gratitude. That is not what we're talking about, but we'll get more into that in a minute. So the challenge is that sometimes we just don't want to, we're just not in the right headspace. It doesn't resonate with us. Grief and loss, it naturally is going to keep us focused on what's gone, what's missing, and what's different. And those are all things that cause us a lot of struggle and strife and pain. And so we may feel like we're very much focused on that spectrum of emotion and thoughts, and we aren't quite as in touch with ideas about feeling like, oh, grateful for what we have and things like that. So it's just maybe not something that we're really able to connect with in the here and now. And so that being the case, we may need to actively try to connect with that side of things in order to create more space for the entire spectrum of emotion and thoughts. Another reason why people can really grapple with the idea of gratitude when they're grieving is that loss experiences can often violate a lot of our assumptions about what even is good in the world, like what purpose and meaning is there to life or to my life? What should I even think is a positive thing in this world? Ideas around trust, safety, and security, whereas prior to experiencing loss, we might have said something like, oh, I'm grateful for my friends who have always been here for me. Well, now after something has violated our trust, we may now say, well, I don't know if I feel grateful for people because I don't know who I can trust anymore. And if we have no sense of security, it can be hard for us to want to stop and feel grateful for other things. So I think that the fact that loss can really turn things on its head and make it really difficult for us to connect with things that used to feel really purposeful and meaningful can make us feel a little more cut off from ideas like gratitude. Grief and loss can also make us feel a lot of things like angry, bitter, cheated, sad, disenchanted, purposeless, numb, etc. So like I said before, we're kind of oftentimes spending a lot more time than we maybe used to grappling with some really unpleasant and painful emotions. So we may feel a little more distant from ideas like gratitude, but there is a good why behind this. And because we're trying to keep these brief and really focused on the practicalities of using the tools, I'm not going to get into all of the research findings, but if people are interested, I'm going to start a conversation about this when I share the video. And if people are interested, we can maybe pull some bullet points from research. We could share actual research articles. So if anybody is interested, we can go ahead and post some of the findings in the community. And these are a few things that gratitude has been linked to that we think are particularly relevant to when we are grieving. But there's a lot of other things that have been linked. Practicing gratitude has been linked to increased well-being, increased optimism, better health, so better psychological health, better physical health, enhanced positive emotion, and that kind of goes hand in hand sometimes with things like optimism and well-being. Increased self-esteem, so people just felt maybe better about themselves. And one thing we do know is that grief can really make us question ourselves, can really be a hit to our self-esteem. That's an odd outcome of grief that people don't always anticipate, but that often does happen, and can help to contribute to improved relationships. Even if somebody feels like they've lost a lot of friends, they may, using gratitude may, and other things, not just gratitude alone, but may come to a place where they say, well, I've lost some connections, I'm more distant from some connections, but those that I do have, I am so much more grateful for, I appreciate so much more, I feel so much closer to. Practicing gratitude, like I said, doesn't always come natural to us, even when we're not grieving. A lot of people are not people who would say they really resonate with the idea of finding gratitude in their day-to-day. Like, it's something they actually actively have to try and do. Whether it comes down to our temperament or just what's going on in our life, there are many reasons why we might not be inclined to want to notice good things or to notice good things. On the left side of the screen, we've shared just like two different ways our brains can kind of get in the way. Like, not to get too in the weeds about how our brains work, right? But our brains are always looking for shortcuts because there's so much information that we take in a momentary basis. And so our brains often take some shortcuts, and oftentimes that has to do with what we pay attention to. So there are a lot of times where we might selectively only attend to things that we believe are relevant while ignoring irrelevant stimuli in the environment. And so if you think about it, if you're feeling really anxious, maybe really insecure, maybe really unsafe, you're going to be really primed to pay attention to all the threats and things like that, rather than being primed to pay attention to things that might help you to feel more safe or more comfortable in an environment. Confirmation bias is a lot like choosing what we attend to in a way. It's the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values. So this is something we talk about a lot when we talk about research, because there's this idea that perhaps researchers sometimes are looking for evidence to support their hypothesis, right? But it's something we do in our lives too. So if we are going through life, if we're going through maybe the holiday season with the idea that like everybody's terrible and this is going to be terrible, we may be more primed to notice the things that support that, and also to remember those things after the fact. So sometimes we're just not primed to see the whole picture or to see the other side of the coin. I want to share a quote from Robert Emmons. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He has another book about like something like, I'm sorry, I don't remember the title, like Life's Little Book of Gratitude, something like that. But he's a psychologist who has done a lot of research and writing about gratitude. And he says, there's an underlying paradox about gratitude. Whereas the evidence is clear that cultivating gratitude in both our lives and in our attitude toward life makes us sustainably happier and healthier people, it is still difficult to practice gratitude on a daily basis. Some days it comes naturally. Other days it feels as if we're taking our medicine, doing something that's good for us, but that we don't really like. On difficult days, it can be like stepping onto the treadmill when you just want to sink into the couch and turn on the television. So the reason I like this quote is because I think it shares what we're really talking about when we're talking about looking for gratitude or making space for gratitude. We're talking about actually having to stop ourselves in our tracks and actively seek it out, because we know we're primed not to, perhaps, or because we know we're more inclined to notice the other things, or maybe just because we know we're so busy we just never stop to think about it. So we wanted to really emphasize that what we're talking about here is actively trying to make space for that gratitude in our lives. And again, this isn't going to change everything, right? It's just one tool that could be helpful, that could help to move us in a direction. Also, really important to say that finding gratitude in your day-to-day life does not minimize the impact of your loss. A lot of people feel guilty acknowledging anything that they're grateful for in their life after loss, because they feel like that's moving beyond their grief, or trying to bypass their grief, or ignoring their grief. That's not the case. You can feel immense amounts of grief, but also feel a sense of gratitude for certain things in your life. We can acknowledge that something really, really terrible happened, and there's also some small things that we can be grateful for. just like holidays and Thanksgiving aren't only for happy people, right? I think a lot of times people who are grieving feel a little left out of the holidays just because there's that idea of holiday cheer and, there's that festivity nature in the air. And it can make us feel a little like the holidays aren't for us, but the holidays are for everyone, even if we're feeling sad. There are pieces of the holidays that we can still connect with, and we can still celebrate and honor them in the way that we feel is right for us. So just like holidays like Thanksgiving aren't only for happy people, neither is gratitude. Gratitude is not only for people who are feeling really positive and happy in their lives. Gratitude is for everybody, even if you also, alongside your gratitude, have some really tough stuff sitting there. You don't have to choose between those things. So we're going to move into talking about some actual tools. And then when we get to the end, we'll do a little challenge, and then we'll leave a little space for conversation in the chat if people are able to. But then again, I'm going to start a conversation in the community as well. So we're going to start with a Thanksgiving tip that we share on our website, and it's super simple because I know a lot of people are like, ugh, gratitude, gross. I don't want to do that right now. I do want to notice the things that are maybe making me sad, because I really feel connected with my pain and my loss and my grief right now. And that's okay. But the one thing that we might challenge somebody who wants to try and find gratitude is that for every time you have a really like negative thought or negative moment or painful or whatever, moment, to seek to balance it out, not negate it, balance it out with a gratitude. So even though Thanksgiving will feel different than this year, actively seeking gratitude can be an empowering way to reclaim a part of the holiday for yourself. So I might not be able to do everything the way I used to do it. My loved one's not here, but I can say that, what gratitude is, I can find it. This is something I can connect with. It's not only for people who are feeling like really good this year. So an example of this might be a negative. I really don't feel like seeing people today, but I have to, right? And if you catch yourself having that thought, maybe then also say, you know what, I'm going to also try and think of something to be grateful for. And then thinking, well, I'm grateful I get to come home to a warm blanket and my loved one's favorite holiday movie at the end of the day. So just as simple as that, just challenging yourself to do something like that. And it might not work every time, but it's something you could say to yourself and challenge yourself to do. This is something Lisa actually shared just, I think, yesterday on social media because of how she's been feeling. And it's kind of a reframe to, if you're feeling like you're not resonating with the idea of gratitude, you can reframe a little bit what you're doing there. So she said, instead of I'm grateful for this year, I've opted to say I have. So it's not that she's not grateful, but gratitude is about thoughts, and having is just about objective truths, right? And sometimes grief can lie to us a little bit. It can distort our thoughts. There's a lot of subjectivity, right, in how we perceive things, and grief can really impact that. So grief can sometimes lie to us a little bit. And what Lisa's saying here is that I'm going to try and bypass that subjectivity. I know that tendency to see things more negatively. And I'm just going to say, whether I'm grateful or not, I have these things. And that can remind you, when you feel like everything's gone, everything's lost, everything's changed, that you do still have some things. And you don't even have to take it the next step further to say, I'm grateful for those things. Just stay at that point if that's where you feel is the most accessible point. A couple of other things to share. Here is a challenge, not a challenge, but an exercise shared by Martin Seligman in his book, Authentic Happiness. And I have a little adaptation for people who are grieving if you prefer to try the adaptation. The challenge that he posed, or the exercise that he posed, is to select one important person from your past who's made a major positive difference in your life and to whom you have never fully expressed your thanks. Write a testimonial or a letter long enough to cover one page, and then share your letter with the person. And what he prompts people to do is to actually seek that person out and share it face to face. And maybe don't even tell them that's what you're going to do, and see what happens and have a conversation. So that's a pretty big ask right there. But I do think many of us, when we're grieving, there might have been a person who was really there for us in our lives. There might be somebody who, because we're thinking about the past and our memories, who's really started to enter into our thoughts a lot. And we want to say we appreciate them. Maybe we now understand somebody a little bit better than we did when we were younger, and we want to share our appreciation for them in that way. So you can do this with somebody who is in your life now. But we also want to offer the adaptation, because I think that this will also provide you an opportunity to experience gratitude. Same exercise as above, but write your letter to your loved one, any loved one who you're grieving. Express thanks to them for all the gifts they gave you, the things they taught you, the way they changed your life, both in life and in death. So write, same exercise, but write it to your loved one. And then you can do whatever you want with your letter. Obviously, that's totally up to you, but a couple of ideas could be to go somewhere where you feel close to them and read the letter aloud. Maybe if they have a headstone somewhere, you could go there. Maybe if it's just a special place to you, you could do that. Maybe if it's at home, you turn on their favorite band and light a candle and read it, or something like that. Share the letter with someone else, maybe someone else who's grieving, or maybe, if I were to do this exercise, maybe I would even share it with my kids who never got to meet my mother, but who I would want them to know how I felt about my mother. So that's something you could possibly do, depending on your kids, their age, things like that. It doesn't have to be your kids. It could be anybody. Or you could just save the letter and reread it whenever you want. Maybe if you're feeling like you want a little boost, if everything feels like it's going wrong, and your loved one is that safe haven for you when things are troubled, and you go to them when you're feeling a lot of pain, this might be a way to connect with them in those moments. A couple of other prompts that involved writing, two more really. This exercise is really simple, and it's shared on the Berkeley website. I'm going to share a link to this. They have a lot of different gratitude exercises, but the idea here is that when we're grieving, stressed, and overwhelmed, we may be less likely to notice good things that happen. So what they say is set aside 5 to 10 minutes at the end of each day to write in detail about 3 things that went well that day. They can be big, giant things, or they can be teeny, tiny, small things. And also describe why you think they happened. This study in particular was linked in research to for completing it for 1 week to increase in happiness that persisted for 6 months. So doing these things on a regular basis in the research has been shown to be helpful with certain groups of people. Another thing you could do, many people are familiar with the idea of a gratitude journal, so you can go about that a million different ways, but some ideas here: write down up to 5 things for which you're grateful for once a week and reflect on what those things mean to you. You could write about positive events from your past or anything coming up in the future. You could write about something someone else did this week you're grateful for. Write something you learned this week that you're grateful for. Make just a list of people, professional organizations that you're grateful to have in your life, in your grief. You could write about a feeling or sensation you had this week that you're grateful for. So those are just a couple ideas, but you can really take this in a lot of different directions. So this one I love because I love to walk. And if you are living somewhere where the weather is at least mild enough to get out, this one is called the Savoring Walk. So basically just set aside 20 minutes to take a walk by yourself every day, leave the headphones at home and the music at home and all that. And as you walk, just try and notice as many positive things around you as they can. It can be a pretty fall tree. It could be, I love the smell of wood burning, like a bonfire, or even like when you can smell someone's fireplace. So it could be smells. It could be sounds of kids playing outside, and that's something you love to hear. So it could be all those different things. So just take time to notice as many positive things. And as you notice each of those positive things, acknowledge each one in your mind. Don't let them just slip past. Take a moment, pause a moment to see each thing and register it in your conscious awareness, and try to identify what it is about that thing that makes it pleasurable to you. And many of the things I just mentioned are things that I associate with good, positive past memories, things like that. So this is something that can possibly connect to your grief, or it might be just something that allows you to appreciate things and also to ground you in the present a little bit. Finally, this is one that we love. Anybody who loves comedy and improv, I would never do improv because that's just not in my skill set. But we really like this idea of applying the rules the yes and rules. And these are via Tina Fey's, if you Google Tina Fey's rules of improv. These might be more general rules that everybody accepts, but anyways, it's the yes and approach to gratitude. So, and why we like this is the yes acknowledges that there are things that can make us unhappy and upset, and these are very real and valid, and we don't want to negate those. We don't want to say yes, but, right? So we say yes, acknowledge what it is that's getting on your nerves, that's bothering you, that's upsetting you. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, my kids are downstairs listening to the television incredibly loud and it feels chaotic in my house. But then instead of saying but or making yourself feel bad for being annoyed or agitated or anything like that, say and. So not yes, but always yes and. Using the word but either works to contradict or justify the statement, while using the word and encourages you to add something like a new possibility, a next step, a new way of looking at the situation. So the third rule of this is make statements. So don't ask questions. Don't waste your time looking for obstacles. Sit around saying why you shouldn't be feeling your initial thing, right? That doesn't matter. Instead, complete the statement. So you can do this a number of ways. Maybe it's the possibility of a future outcome. So yes, it's getting cold, which really I don't like. And that means it could snow, right? Which I love. I love snow, right? Maybe it'll distance you from the stressor. Yes, I've listened to my kids bicker all morning, and this gives me an excuse to have alone time in a hot bath, right? Or maybe it's just something that makes you laugh, or it's a totally made up scenario. So yes, that man was very rude to me on the street, and now because of karma, I imagine he'll go step in a puddle and walk around with wet socks all day, and who wants that, right? So it could be anything. There are no mistakes, only opportunities. That's the last rule, which in this context, I guess we're going to say that wherever you end up, decide to own it, follow through with it, or live it. So that's the last one that we wanted to share, but we will share a link to that website where there's a lot of different tools and techniques and exercises. So here's your optional assignment we want to keep these really practical and give you guys takeaways. Before our next coping session, which will be next Tuesday, choose at least one of these activities to try. So try using any mental exercise. If you choose a mental exercise, try using it for at least a day or more, even better. Or if you choose one of the writing exercises, try to complete at least one writing or journaling exercise before we meet next week. And notice how you feel while using that tool. Ask yourself, could I see this helping me if I used it in a sustained way? Does this tool seem realistic for me? Because what we want you guys to do is decide if these different tools work for you. Some of you might be like, heck no, I do not like this tool. And that's fine. There are so many different tools, and not every tool is going to work for every person. And then finally, notice what doubts are coming up for you as you use the exercise. And ask yourself, are these doubts typical for me? Are they often getting in the way for me no matter what type of coping I'm using? So therefore, are they worth trying to push through? Or are these doubts like real, actual obstacles that seem like reasons to maybe try a different tool instead? So